What's up everybody, I'm Derek, this is Rocking eForge, and today I'm going to be forging a bending wrench. Now I really enjoy making my own tools, and I decided I needed to make an addition to my toolbox, and that is a bending wrench. So without any further ado, let's get rocking. I'm starting out with a piece of 3/4 inch mild steel round stock. And I'm just flattening this down. I'm gonna take this down to about 3/8 inch thick. I'm gonna forge that flat to about 3/8 of an inch thick. And that's really just because I don't have any flat stock of this size around. And I'm using my rounding hammer here just to get as much spreading as I can out of this, because I want it to get a little bit wider as I spread it. And I'm just going to make a nice smooth transition by using the horn here from this flat section into the round section of the bar that's going to become the handle. Make sure this is all flat. All right, so now I've got to decide if I want to try to cut this using the bandsaw or cut this with a chisel. I'm thinking the chisel would end up cutting this very odd, because all of my hot cut chisels have quite a bit of a bevel to them, and that would forge a big kind of angled channel in the middle of this. It would spread the material outward from the center, which isn't necessarily a problem, but I would have a big kind of angle on the side of each cut portion by using the chisel. So I think I'm gonna let this cool down, and then I'm gonna cut this down the middle using my bandsaw. If you don't have a bandsaw, feel free to use a hacksaw or go ahead and cut this with a hot cut chisel. You'll just have to reforge the shape back to where you want it later. But before we cut this, I'm gonna go ahead and just step this off on the far edge of the anvil. And I'm gonna start working on the handle here. And I'm just gonna forge this kind of square and then flatten it down to about the same thickness as what's going to become the bending portion of the wrench. And I'm just gonna keep the handle a rough square here, because I'd like to put a decorative twist in it just to make it look nice. All right, so now I've got the handle where I want it. I'm just gonna make sure it's all kind of squared up and roughly the same thickness. Even out the surface here. And this isn't going to be a very large bending wrench, which is why I'm leaving the handle pretty short. Next heat, we're gonna come in and hammer down on the diagonals to knock down those corners and get rid of those sharp edges. And I'll straighten everything up now that we've got the corners broken down, and that'll play into the type of twist that I make in this handle later on. Now I'm just gonna take this to the near edge of the anvil, and kind of hold it at a bit of an angle, and I'm just gonna forge this off in order to cut it off the bar. The forging at an angle is gonna make that kind of stick up. come back for another heat here. And that draws a nice reverse taper on this bar. And this will neck down to the point where I can grab a pair of tongs and just simply break it off at the end. No hot cut hardy needed. So now I'm just gonna forge this tail down into a long taper and then loop it around into a decorative, kind of a decorative little loop there at the end of the handle so that I can hang it on a hook or up on my tool wall or anything of that nature. And I'm just gonna do that by drawing out a forward taper on the far edge of the anvil. I'm gonna go ahead and use the near edge of the anvil to step this off. And give a nice little transition from the handle to the actual loop. I'm making sure to keep these edges either up off the face of the anvil or off the edge so that I'm striking on fully supported steel. So that I don't end up collapsing those little kind of edges or corners that I made. Now that I've got the tail kind of worked out, the size, length, and dimensions that I want it, I'm just gonna knock those edges off like I did with the handle. Then I'm just going to go ahead and on the diagonal forge a little rat tail scroll. Going in the opposite direction of where I want the loop to be. And I might have made this a little bit big now that I look at it. That's okay. In the next heat, I'm gonna bring this to the far edge, knock this off. Actually, I'll just do it now. And then knock this off at an angle. And the next heat, I'll come cool this scroll in some water so that when I strike on it, it won't deform, and I'll bend the loop over the horn of the anvil back to contact the handle, and it'll make a nice decorative little hanging loop. And you can use the horn of the anvil to adjust how open or shut that curve is, or that bend, or the loop is. And you'll notice this loop is forged and situated on the diagonal as opposed to being in line with the handle and what's going to become the bending forks of the wrench. And that's because I'm going to twist this handle and it's going to be 45 degrees out of the plane of the actual piece. And I think that looks really nice when you forge a two-sided taper on the end of a piece to make a loop like this. I like to have it on the diagonal as opposed to in line with one of those edges, because otherwise it ends up being asymmetrical and you get it lining up not in line with one of those edges. You'd have to forge that down to make it kind of flow better. I personally just like the way this looks. But I think I have made it to the point where I'm happy with where the handle is for now. Obviously, I'm going to be doing some more decorative work and a twist on this handle later, but I think now is the time to let this cool down and cut into the kind of paddle that we've got going on down here at the other end in order to start making the bending forks of the wrench itself. Now the plan here is going to be to just come in with my bandsaw and cut down the middle, pretty much down to about here, so that I can bend this side out and have the other side bend around and have them both kind of become the bending forks of the wrench, and the side that is closer to the handle will end up getting cut short so that they're the same length. I'm just going to use the bandsaw here to cut down the middle of the paddle in order to create the bending forks of the wrench here. It sure feels like it's got teeth, and it's not going the wrong direction. So I don't know. I'll see if I've got another belt, but otherwise I guess I'm doing it old school. Yeah, you gotta love that good old sunk cost fallacy. Nah, I'm just kidding. I broke out of this sunk cost fallacy. All right, so the next step I'm gonna do here is I'm going to heat this back up in the forge, try to cool off this side so that it doesn't bend as much, and then chisel down this slot that I've cut in order to bend this out, and then I'll have to cut this off at the right length that I decide to go with, and obviously clean up the edge and the cut portion of this and make it all pretty. So now, I've got this square corner here that I've got to deal with, and I'm just going to work that on the edge of the anvil and hammer that down in here until I get a roughly square corner out of this, this side of the forks of the bending wrench. All right, so we're making progress here. I'm probably going to have to do some filing on the underside of that because of that square corner that I left there, and that's fine. Not a huge deal. Now I want this flat all the way along this edge or this surface of the wrench. So the next heat I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bring this in, cool the tip of this portion off, and then hammer down on it in order to move all of that steel that direction to the face of the anvil. All right, so obviously this is not going to end up that long. The length of that will be dependent on how much length I can get out of this. But the first thing I want to do before I bend this portion is to flatten these sharp edges along the inside of both of these arms so that there's no risk of leaving sharp impressions on a piece that I am trying to bend by leaving those sharp corners there. All right, so I think it's definitely time to address this little kind of lump that I've got going on with this arm. I'm gonna go ahead and lock this in the vise and file that down and kind of blend that into the arm there. That cold shed ended up a lot worse than I originally anticipated. I'm just now evening this all out. And I'm just going to continue forging this down on both arms of this just to get it down to a rough circle. And I want to make sure this is roughly 90 degrees from the wrench itself. All right, so I'm going to round up the end of this other arm and then I'm going to get to bending that to meet up, and we'll cut this arm off where those are the same length. And that'll end up making the bending forks of this bending wrench. Now I'm just going to bend this over the horn. And then we're going to forge that out. And then it's just going to take me a little bit of time to kind of work this out to be as close to 90 degrees on each bend as I can. Looks like I got about 1.25 inches between the two arms there, and that's okay. Worked out pretty all right. So I've got that pretty well done. This middle arm, or this arm, could still come out a little bit, and I will work that out once I get the handle all finished up. But you don't need to watch me fiddle with this thing for the next 3 hours to get it perfect. So I'm gonna move on to working on the handle, and I'll come to adjust that not in this video. I think with how this turned out, a little skinnier than the overall handle, I'm going to go ahead and heat this back up and forge down on those diagonals and thin up the handle a little bit more before I put in a decorative twist, and I think that's where we're going to leave it. All right, so I'm looking at that, and I think that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and touch mark here toward the end of the handle, and then I'll put in the twist. I'm gonna do just a simple split twist on this, so I'm gonna go ahead and chisel on all 4 sides and then just do a nice twist, and we'll be finished up. Now I'm suddenly very glad I have this chisel that I forged with an angle on it, because this handle has given me the ability to stand my hand off from this arm of the bending forks while still maintaining alignment. Works out pretty good. Just cooled that handle tip off just to make sure I'm not messing that up. Then I'm going to clamp right here, because that's the farthest down that my chisel marks go. And then just give this a nice twist. And then I twisted this so that the nice little decorative loop that we made here for hanging is in line with the actual wrench. And I'm going to take this to the stump and straighten this out using a piece of wood. And now to just brush it nice and clean, get rid of all that forged scale. Now I'm just going to quench this because it's mild steel, not a big concern for cooling this off too fast. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this extra material here off, and we will be finished. This bending wrench should do me very well in future projects and getting fairly precise bends in pieces of steel. And so I'm really happy that I decided to make this and that it turned out, you know, still fairly decorative and ornate. If you were inspired to make one of these, let me know in the comments section. Otherwise, that is going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, leave a comment, hit subscribe, ring that notification bell. If you want to support me in the channel further, please consider becoming an honorary striker on my Patreon. That link is in the description below the video. Or please consider becoming a member on my YouTube channel. And as always, keep on rocking.